I'm going to open the public hearing for the Police Reform Collaboration Plan. I just want to talk a little bit about the steps that we went through. July through September was a request for panel members to serve on the community input panel, in which we ended up with 32 members on the community input panel. October through November, we hosted 3 community input panel meetings. December through February, we hosted 6 elected official law enforcement panel meetings. And February 11th, the Plan Review Committee met. The final week in February, the draft plan was released to the public. So those were quickly the steps that we went through. I will say that all of the meeting proceedings, the YouTube videos, and the minutes from the meetings are posted on the Police Reform website. So if you want to watch any of the meetings, it's all there. We've been very, very transparent with this process so that the public can watch every step of the way. The draft plan has been posted on the website, as well as the link to our Columbia County website, the Columbia County Reform website. Due to the number of speakers, we are limited speakers' time to 3 minutes each. Kelly Baccaro is our official timekeeper, and she'll give you a 10-second warning prior to the 3 minutes being up. We have 22 people that are going to be speaking, hence why we're limiting the remarks to 3 minutes. If you can't get your remarks done in 3 minutes, we're happy to take your written testimony as well. So at this point, I want to thank a few people. I want to thank our co-chairs of this committee, Mike Benvenuto, who is chair of the Public Safety Committee for Columbia County Board of Supervisors, Bill Hughes, who is a community representative and also a co-chair. I want to thank Sheriff Bartlett and his staff for the hard work that they helped put in to help put this plan together. And I also want to thank all the community members, the panel members, for the meetings that they put in, and I think it's been a very, very, very good product. So with that, I'm going to ask our first speaker to speak, which will be Supervisor Hoatling.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank everyone who put in the work to get this draft plan to where it is today. It was a long and involved process with people from all different walks of life in our community coming together to work on these very important issues. I want to specifically thank the chairman for taking the time to hear feedback from community members, elected officials, and law enforcement, and for incorporating that feedback into the draft plan. I want to thank the sheriff for being open to hearing the concerns of the community and for taking proactive steps to address these concerns. Most importantly, I want to thank all members of the public who participated in the process so far, either by serving on a panel or by providing feedback via letters and emails. And I would also like to thank all members of the public who are here tonight to make their voices heard. Hearing the feedback of our community members is of the utmost importance in a process like this, and I am grateful that all have had an opportunity to be heard. In Columbia County, you are 4 times more likely to get arrested if you are Black than if you are white, and you are 9 times more likely to get arrested for a felony. This draft plan acknowledges this disparity and works on addressing it on many levels, from body cameras to policy creation and training. I have already heard from many community members that they feel safer in our county because of the new immigration enforcement policy adopted by the Columbia County Sheriff's Office, which is included in this draft plan. To be clear, this plan is just the first step in a long journey. There is a lot of work to be done, and this plan is the starting point, not the destination. The chairman will work on putting together an implementation committee as soon as possible. This committee will be bipartisan and will look to public feedback as well as best practices across the country, to guide the process. We will get to work on implementing the plan as well as following up on long-term goals and working on obtaining potential funding via grants and other avenues for the goals that involve more funding than the current budget allows. I am proud of the work that has been done up until this point to create this draft, and I am excited for the work that will be done next. I believe this draft provides an excellent starting point. I hope that all of my colleagues will join me in voting yes on this draft plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor. And I just want to reiterate, and I was going to say this in my opening remarks, this is a start. This is not an end. And I mean, this will be something that we're going to be continually working on moving forward. So thank you again. Next to speak would be Supervisor Linda Musman.
Okay, thank you all for this opportunity. The police reform document reveals that there's more work to be done in our community to create even-handed justice. I applaud those who have pressed for changes that at times met with resistance. I also know that there is even more work to be done to make the document more comprehensive. This is just the beginning of reform. There are two key pieces missing in this document which should be addressed. The first is the diminishing population at the jail. It should be part of this document and was left out. We have a jail that was built for 135 inmates and now houses 40 plus or minus, depending on the day. Bail reform has diminished the need for housing inmates. Now is the time to make those changes and face this challenge in Columbia County. The second issue that needs to be addressed concerns the recently purchased body cameras. Body cameras require a policy that needs to be approved by the County Board of Supervisors, and we are still waiting for this to happen. Finally, the results of the graphs and the pie charts in this document prove the disparity of justice here in Columbia County. I appreciate the work and effort put into this document and look forward to ways to address other issues such as diversion of arrests, which are attributed to mental health and drug issues. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Supervisor. Next to speak would be Dr. Atkins.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to address is the recommendation in the plan on page 36 to explore options to hire a public relations person employed at the county and shared among various county departments. Unfortunately, I think this will not address the need to improve community relations, which requires an improved understanding of the needs and concerns of the community by law enforcement, more than it does to improved understanding of law enforcement by the community. And the very presence of this recommendation, I think, underscores the extent of the problem. I think it shows that the Sheriff's Office really doesn't understand or even recognize it. So I think there are several possible mechanisms that I could recommend that would better normalize relations between law enforcement and the community. And those would include routine visits by law enforcement to minority businesses and homes to find out what concerns and needs they have and provide contact information for non-emergent requests. Second would be attendance at minority community events in a non-threatening, non-official capacity, preferably without weapons. A third would be arranging community forums to discuss issues of mutual concern at which sheriffs and deputies could attend out of uniform so that people could get to know each other on a personal level. So I think a program of this nature could go a long way to improving community relations with minimal cost. And I'd like to note that the community events listed in Appendix 6 of the document are clearly not in minority communities. They're not targeted to minority communities. And the fact that the ratio of arrests of Black persons to white persons has steadily increased over recent years, as could be seen in the charts that were taken out of the document, it attests to the failure of the current community event attendance by the Sheriff's Office to improve racial bias in policing. So I think this really brings up the point that, as with all aspects of the plan, follow-up will be important to ensure appropriate implementation and to assess whether the program is achieving its goals. And this will require measuring outcomes at baseline and at specified intervals and revising the plan if the goals are not achieved. So in these respects, the plan as published is deficient and should be amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Louise Robach.
Yes, thank you for letting me comment. I've been a resident of Southport for now close to 15 years and a resident of Columbia County for I think over 30 years. I have a couple comments both on the process and substantively. I'm concerned that the review process did not actually incorporate a review by the three police departments, Greenport, Stockport, and Philmont. I know they were intended to, but I have not seen an analysis of the practices by those police departments, nor any pledge to make any changes. In short, there hasn't been a hard look at the practices of those three independent police departments. I also question how any plan, if there is a plan to for these three police departments to take any action with respect to racial disparity in policing. And again, I haven't seen that analysis. I question how that can be done under the auspices of the Board of Supervisors. For example, is there a memorandum of understanding in which the three police departments say that they will fall under the jurisdiction of the county government? I question how that's going to be accomplished. Substantively, I have concerns about the supposed review by the sheriff department practices. I have seen mostly the sheriff talking about current practices. Accreditation is in the past. It does not address racial disparities. Body cameras were in the works. Those are not by themselves measures that address racial disparity or racial viewed policing. The sheriff has said the deputies are not racist. They don't act based on race. That doesn't take into account implicit bias. And I think the executive order by the governor mandates that there be a hard look. And in my estimation, the sheriff has not done that. Finally, there's been no data, hard data that's presented in terms of how policing is done and the impact on persons based on race, or a pledge to undertake a record keeping of police stops, arrests, and other interactions. That is rather put off to a long-term goal if there's future funding. So I don't believe this plan meets the governor's expectations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next would be Supervisor Benvenuto.
Hello, thank you, Matt. We started this process last year for a police reform plan for the county, and I believe we have developed a comprehensive plan that addresses everything from transparency to training, behavioral health protocol, hiring, and community relations. While it is important to maintain law and order, it is of utmost importance to preserve and to protect public safety. This plan improves upon that entire process, but the main takeaway is that this plan, by design, will continue to be developed through a subcommittee in order to enhance and enact long-term goals, and that will be a public process. I very much appreciate everyone's assistance in this plan. I have enjoyed working on the panels and all the people that assisted. I look forward to that group process continuing in the future to enact the long-term goals and anything else that is developed within that subcommittee process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Benvenuto. Next to speak is Susan Bain.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on this process and to offer suggestions about how the draft should be strengthened. As you have discussed already, several people, the data was there that clearly showed that there is some racial disparity. However, it really appeared that there had been no prior local acknowledgement of that fact. The questions had not been asked, nor had there been government requirements to collect data and get to the underlying reasons for this bias. High-performing organizations are committed to performance improvement. And essentially, this mandate is a very giant performance improvement project. And the work really requires a commitment to ask questions about how the law enforcement entity needs to improve, planning how to collect relevant data about performance, analyzing that data to turn it into useful information, and then acting on it. And then subsequent data collection determines if the actions have had impact. And this cycle is continuous and it is timely. It is not long-term. In the transparency and accountability section of the plan draft, there is no intent or commitment to initiate collection of data in the short term to expand upon the minimum data that's already required by the Department of Justice. What were the reasons for calls that led to arrests? Did traffic stops escalate to arrests? What ethnicities were involved other than Black, white in the database? The draft plan speaks to these crucial aspects of data collection as a long-term goal dependent upon additional funding. I would submit that this cannot be deferred, and it is the responsibility of the sheriff and his law enforcement agency to establish relevant measures linked to goals with specific target dates and accountable persons designated. There are less expensive, more easily implemented ways to capture data, using clear data points with entry and display on an Excel spreadsheet. This same process in the same part of the draft should be implemented without delay for tracking complaints or compliments about individual officer behaviors, using the same process I just mentioned. The Sheriff's Office has said that they are an agency that it exceeds all the standards that they are adhering to, but to support this assertion, the public needs to see data that will prove that they are meeting the racial bias mandate decrease. Thank you.
I've got to remember to unmute. Thank you very much.
Chairman, can I interrupt for just 1 second? There was
Sure.
a question on the timing. I have the first clock set for 2 minutes and 50 seconds. The alarm will go off, giving you 10 seconds more to go, just so everyone's aware. Okay, so you do have a total of 3 minutes after the first alarm, the first alarm goes off, a second one will go off in 10 seconds, just so everyone knows, okay?
Thank you, Kelly. Next to speak is Jeffrey Kiplinger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeff Kiplinger. I live in Claverick. I have a PhD in analytical chemistry, and my work is in data analysis. Now, early on in the PRP process, several panel members asked to see data on arrests by racial demographic, and the Sheriff's Department supplied a short table of arrest totals over a 20-year period. Problem with a 20-year period is it's very difficult to understand whether things are getting better or worse if you aggregate data over this long period. But this is the draft report's pie chart on page 17. It's not particularly informative. So I discovered that at least for the period for 2016 to 2019, DCJS collected and collated county felony and misdemeanor arrest data by racial group. This is what Supervisor Howdling referred to a few moments ago. These publicly available data come from Sheriff's Office records and provide insights into racial bias that were not being discussed by the panel. So I'm showing a graph that I developed. Apologies that it's not clear, but I didn't think we were going to be able to share our screens. I'll use this graph to make a couple of quick points. First, if you are Black, you are 9 times more likely than a white person to be arrested in Columbia County. Going back to the raw numbers, we can actually see an even more dramatic 12x racial bias factor for drug crimes. This is useful to know because a number of studies have shown that drug crimes for all types are equally prevalent among Black and white racial groups. And therefore, it's reasonable to conclude when you see a very large bias factor, you're looking at a bias problem in policing. Second, this bias factor is increasing over the 2016 to 2019 period, as you can see from the graph. This indicates that the anti-bias training programs that were touted as being highly effective by the sheriff's office in the PRP meetings are in fact ineffective, and as they cost money, they are a waste of taxpayer funding. Third, I supplied this graph and others to the panel along with detailed methodology and references. They were added to the report and later removed. The present draft states that the racial bias is difficult to measure, collecting necessary data is expensive and beyond the capabilities of the sheriff's office. This is untrue and disingenuous, and these are public data. Our greater concern should be that much of the report proposes new programs, sometimes expensive, and makes no mention of this obvious way to measure whether those programs succeed in reducing racial bias. The objective of 203 is to examine bias in policing and to make proposals to reduce that bias. I would ask that the panel review the report before approving it to see that the racial bias that exists is named and quantified, and to insist that a measurement of the effectiveness be included for any proposed program before that program is budgeted. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, Bill Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everybody. By the way, I'm co-chair of the police reform panel, and I want to thank everyone that participated, especially our citizens in the reform panel. Our elected officials took place in the elected officials panel. I want to address a couple of issues. There were some things that people were wondering, like how the document got written, who wrote it, those types of things. So I want to go there. What we basically did is we gathered information from each panel that we had on each day. Though the notes will be collated, and then we met as an executive panel to go over the various notes that we had. We would do bullet points on the particular points that we thought were at the highest importance, and try to implement them into the document. Now, can we say that the document is a perfect document? We certainly cannot. But what was driven home to us by people like Supervisor Mia with immigration, or Supervisor Hoteling, who really pushed us to work harder, was the fact that we need to focus on policies and procedures, and along with Kim Singletary and Joni Hunt. So, and I think that we really did focus on that, and we tried our very hardest to make sure that we were looking at policy and procedures. Did we focus so much on the language? We didn't focus as much on the language and some of the things that people would have loved to see in the document, but we certainly did focus, put a big effort into putting some of the policies in place. For example, trainings on biases, making sure that we look at hiring diversity, again, the immigration policies, things like that were really important to everybody across the board. So obviously, this certainly is a document, a working document, and that will need to be improved as we move forward. But I had to say that this was a daunting task, and I think that we really did a great job getting to the point to where we are. So thank you, everyone, and I hope that our Board of Supervisors can support it.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Next, Craig Dillon.
Good evening. My name is Craig Dillon. I live in Canaan. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. The governor's executive order is about eliminating racial bias in policing. That's not what this plan is about. To me, it's an aspirational document and not a plan. I'd like to focus, though, on something that is in the plan: training. The list of training programs in the document is impressive and covers most of the types of training required to eliminate racial bias. The sheriff has mentioned the 7,000 hours of annual training his office provides on more than one occasion. What I don't see in the plan is a single word about how the effectiveness of this training is measured. I've seen online training for planning boards and ZBAs where you can stream or click through for an hour or two, followed by a test. You can keep answering it until you have it all correct, and bingo, you passed. I'm certain that many police training sessions are structured similarly. It's critical to structure online training. It is critical to structure training system in a way that will produce results. I'm going to offer a few suggestions. If you have a training program such as I described above, throw them out. Know your staff and how they learn. Some people are audio learners, others visual. Tailor the training to the individual's ability to learn. Training is more successful when the student has contact with the instructor, whether in person or in today's world, online. Spread out your training. Too much at one time, especially in a new subject, dampens its effect. You should seek out employees with experience, such as the military. They may have received extensive training relevant to yours and be willing and able to provide it to their colleagues. Establish a system for discussing training with the trainees to determine what they have absorbed. And if you get negative results, explain the importance of it and require repeat training. Evaluate the training you provide regularly. It doesn't hurt to see what's new out there. Finally, and most importantly, establish a culture that values the training and makes it clear that the actions or inactions it provides is expected on the streets. The culture of the department must match the culture of the training. Guber Grewal is the Attorney General of New Jersey at a SEEK. At a meeting of state attorney generals discussing policy, this very different looking man stood up and said, "Culture eats policy for breakfast." Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Lee Jamison.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. I'm Lee Jamison from 18 Riverview Street, Stuyvesant, New York. I've lived in Columbia County for over 40 years. I have a master's in social work and have been an advocate for people with developmental disabilities. I appreciated the opportunity to watch the previous panels, and I appreciate their work. And I appreciate the opportunity to comment now. I want to address use of force. Stuyvesant happens to be one of the smaller rural towns in Columbia County, and we actually defunded the police over 50 years ago. This past year, at the suggestion of one of our town justices, the town board eliminated a judge position due to lack of need. Instead, what the voters did go for this year was a bond to renovate the firehouse. What keeps the peace in Stuyvesant? During this year of pandemic, maybe we've seen less of each other, but also reach out more to those in need through our neighbor-to-neighbor meals and rides to hospital appointments, Meals on Wheels, recovery kitchen deliveries, virtual repair cafe advice. Our volunteer firemen put out the fires and help clear the tree blowdowns on the power lines. We can call a neighborhood deputy or the state police if we have a concern involving possible criminal activity. In a generally peaceful community, it's a serious responsibility to give a law enforcement officer lethal weaponry and permission in certain circumstances to kill. It's a serious responsibility to give peace officers the power to detain and arrest neighbors and visitors. So it's troubling to hear that in the US, and this was an NPR report, that 135 unarmed people were killed by police since 2015. It's troubling to hear that in Columbia County, people of color are 9 times more likely to be arrested and wind up being charged with a felony. It's troubling to hear that this statistic actually escalated over the past 4 years. This past year, it was more than troubling. It was horrifying to learn of the near-death beating of my young auto repair mechanic at an off-duty party last July 4th in Kinderhook, allegedly by people in law enforcement or who purported to be supporters of Back the Blue. Now, our accredited sheriff's department, in theory, has policies about the use of force, and clearly ascribes to de-escalation of conflict wherever possible. Nevertheless, and Craig stole my line here. As the New Jersey Attorney General Gavir Grewal has famously said, culture eats policy for breakfast. Policy is only a piece of paper. How will the sheriff and the Board of Supervisors ensure a culture of peacekeeping, nonviolent peacekeeping in our community?
Okay.
Lee, we had to mute you. 3 minutes are up, hon.
Okay. Next is Supervisor Ligonia.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to thank everyone for that participated in this immense project. We were tasked by the governor's office to do this during a year that everybody knows was obviously a pandemic and just tremendous challenges for all of us. I am very pleased with how this whole panel came together, how everybody worked together, how the community came out. I'm pleased with the leadership. I appreciate what Matt did. I appreciate what the law enforcement departments did by cooperating and realizing that there are some issues, not debating them with us, but moreover, taking ownership and trying to work with us and trying to figure out a better plan going forward. I want to thank our mental health department that participated in this project. I think they offered some tremendous ideas and guidance for us. And what I'd like to say is that in order for this to work, and obviously this is a living document, is that the community and all of us have to stay involved and stay engaged. If we just do this one document and everybody here just sort of walks away from it, then that's where it ends. But I think if everyone here can stay engaged, can stay involved, can reach out to your town leadership, your county leadership, law enforcement, stay involved. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know how we can help. Let us know what else we can do. And that's super important for this to work and for these changes to be made as we move forward in this process. So again, I want to thank everyone, and I appreciate everybody's time and efforts on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Ligonia. Next is Raymond Strawn. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did. Thank you. I just wanted to share a personal story. I live in Hudson, New York, and around 2016, I was a witness to an incident. All the adults involved were white, and I identified myself as biracial. And during the incident, the police officer on scene singled me out, and in my opinion, was inappropriate, and I felt like my rights were violated. So I felt that I can go ahead and make a complaint to the police department, and hope to see if anything would go further. At the time, I was at the Columbia Green Community College, and I spoke with one of my professors who was a retired police officer. I wanted his input on how I felt. He explained to me that I did have grounds to file a complaint, so I did so in March 2016. When I approached the police department, the sergeant refused to take my complaint. He was rude, he insulted me, and threatened me to not return. And I've had issues again with this police officer back in 2019. And when I hear holding law enforcement accountable, hearing about data and trying to do the right thing, in my opinion, that can't be achieved if no one knows something wrong happened. If citizens' voices are silent and they can't be spoken, what accountability can anyone really achieve? In the incident in 2019, I did reach out to local politicians, and no one has gotten back to me, and I felt that my voice wasn't heard again. So this is why I kind of support an independent body when it comes to complaints among police officers. The Albany Police Department has one. It's the Albany Community Police review board. I know it wasn't really brought up in this document, but I kind of heard about this public meeting kind of late, and I wanted to just share my story. And I'm very passionate about this topic, and I feel like if I don't speak up, who will? So I want to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. And I just wanted to note that a police review panel is something that is under review and is part of this plan. It just needs to be developed, and we've agreed to do it through a subcommittee process. Next is Theo Anthony. You're on mute, Theo.
All right, how about now?
You're good.
All right, cool. My name's Theo Anthony. I'm a resident of Hudson, New York. For the past 8 months, I've proudly served on Mayor Kamal Johnson's Police Advisory and Reconciliation Committee, where I spearheaded a series of reforms around body cameras, use of force, and data transparency policies. While I'm really happy with the progress shown here tonight, I'm here to urge the committee members to take it further. Specifically, I have serious concerns about the lack of policy around body cameras. Body cameras are meant to increase transparency and provide accountability for both the public and the police. Body cameras on their own do not solve anything. Without clear and effective policies, we risk not only failing at these objectives, but further alienating the public from the police that serve them. Current body camera guidelines are based on New York State Department of Criminal Justice Service recommendations. They are intended as a ground floor to be built upon by local jurisdictions. On their own, they are vague and do not address the key aspects of this new technology. In our park report in Hudson, I've written an extensive primer on body cameras, as well as outlined a long list of recommendations. You can check it out there at the City of Hudson website. Just for tonight, real quick, I'd like to highlight 3 specific policy recommendations that I encourage this committee to consider immediately. Number 1, extend the buffer mode of the body camera to 120 seconds and enable the saving of both audio and video. This is to ensure that as much context as possible is recorded in the video footage. 2, establish a clear timeline for the public release of body camera evidence and critical incidents. And lastly, and most importantly, prohibit officers from viewing body camera footage before making a sworn statement. After making a sworn statement, officers may view the footage and make any necessary changes with an explanation for why the change was made. Just some explanation, this is a good faith check all around. Body cameras often capture extremely fraught moments, and it's understandable that someone's memory might not always be perfect. However, this creates a safeguard against a worst case scenario in which an officer might change their narrative after viewing body camera footage using available video evidence to retroactively justify that use of force. If more information then becomes available through video evidence, then officers still have the opportunity to add that in. This is a policy recommendation not just coming from me, it's backed by New York NYU Law School, the ACLU. This reform alone will go a long way towards safeguarding against body camera misuse. And that's it. So thanks for all the work that's taken to get to this point, and thank you in advance for all the work to come.
Thank you very much. Again, I just want to note that the body cameras that we ordered will not be implemented until a policy is adopted by the Board of Supervisors in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department. So there's gonna have to be a policy in place before it's adopted, or before it's used, I should say. Next, Catherine Barafaldi.
Thank you very much. Very well done. Perfect pronunciation. Catherine Barafaldi. I'm from the town of Ghent. And I had the privilege of being on the community input panel early on. And I've watched with great interest getting to know some of my neighbors through this medium and hearing your statements at the various panels and your statements tonight. So thank you to all of you for the time and your effort that you've put into this project. I've watched you and I know that you've worked really hard. And I think that it's really positive how far we've come. And I'm happy with what I'm hearing tonight, that this is a work in progress and it's not complete yet. And in that spirit, especially looking forward to the implementation committee, I want to offer just a few points about the goals that I see described in the plan, and make some suggestions around strengthening the goals. So without putting too fine a point, the goals throughout the document seem rather weak. I'll talk a little bit about that and give an example. I want to say first what strong goals are like and what strong goals look like and what they do. So strong goals are specific and they're measurable and they're time bound. So many of the goals that we see in the document are not yet that. And so to the implementation committee, as you're continuing this work, having those things in mind, are the goals that you're setting specific, measurable, and time bound. Goals that are strong in those ways end up being inspirational. They end up being motivating, and they also hold people accountable. If we're clear about what it is we're trying to achieve, we can then decide whether or not we got there. So an example of that, there are a few throughout, but the example I'm going to give is on page 20. It's great that on page 20, we recognize the lack of diversity throughout the Sheriff's Department currently in the staff. That's acknowledged, and that's great. On page 20, it goes on to say that we're committed to addressing this issue by placing a focus on recruiting, training, and retaining Black people, people of color, and women, and it goes on. And that is also great. That sounds really good, but that is not specific, and it is not measurable, and it is not time bound. So we don't know exactly what that means. We're going to focus on it is too vague and it's too general, and it doesn't let us know really what we're driving at. So I would say instead, again, as an example, a goal related to the diversity of the staff might sound more like, by 2025, the staff of the Columbia County Sheriff's Office will reflect the community we serve, including 50% women and 15% people of color. So that's an example of what you might be driving at as you continue to work on these goals and carry this out to fruition. And that's all I've got. Thank you. Look at that timing.
Thank you very much. Next is Brenda Gevertz. How did I do with that name?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm Brenda Gevertz from Ghent, and my master's degrees are in community organization and public administration. And I want to thank all who worked on this report. It is a step in the right direction. I guess as a Ghent resident, I also share Catherine's concerns. The report demonstrates the need for reform, but these reforms cannot happen unless there are measurable and time-bound objectives. This is really important. And anything that is done going forward should have implementation and oversight that is measurable and time-bound. And I want to encourage the committee, the people who worked on the panel, to make sure that any implementation and any oversight going forward reflects the diversity of our community and the demographics of our community. And I think if we can do those things, the report will be not only well received, but it will be meaningful in its impact. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Joan Hunt.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd just like to thank all of the speakers this evening. I've learned a lot just by hearing you all, and I'd actually like to start there because I think we have a lot of expertise in our community around different issues that we potentially have not engaged in this process. And I would love to see.
Breaking up a little bit. If you could just pause a little bit and then come back.
Okay, hold on. I'll take my headphones out. Hold on. Is this?
Joan,
Say something.
You need to unmute, hon.
Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
So I just like to thank the other speakers that spoke this evening, and I'd like to really just start there by acknowledging the expertise that we have in our community here in Columbia County. and think about ways that we can engage that in the implementation process, whether it's around more profound data collection and really digging there, or if it's around goal setting, I think, or body camera policy. We really do have experts in our community that we could engage that I think are willing to join the conversation and further the reform. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And also several of the wins that I think are significant in this report. While I acknowledge it's not perfect, I think we did really do some good work and acknowledge the safety for immigrants in Columbia County, that being a huge win, as well as personally something I've been involved in, which is training for officers on safeguarding children of arrested parents. I personally have worked with the Sheriff's Office since 2016 to shift the visiting policy at the Columbia County Jail as it pertains to children. And I've actually witnessed firsthand a willingness and a culture shift around how the officers and the staff there interact with children during visits. So I am hopeful that we can do more around culture shift more broadly. I do hear that as a definite starting point and really thinking more broadly about that. But I also do feel that that absolutely is possible with the expertise and increased quality training. So again, I just like to, thank everyone that was a part of this and really hope that we can engage broader expertise in the community to drive this plan forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Larry Waite.
Hello, can you hear me? Great,
Yeah, you're
okay.
good.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your efforts in engaging stakeholders and developing the police reform plan and affording me an opportunity to speak tonight. I have 3 issues. Some of the issues have already been touched on, so I'll try to make them briefer than my original points. But I submitted a letter along with other few concerned citizens or residents, that letter will provide additional detail on the issues that I'm raising this evening, in addition to other comments on the other reform initiatives that I will not speak to this evening. First, the plan's comprehensive review of policing policies does not conclusively demonstrate that racial bias does not exist in the police agency. The New York State reform effort is grounded on the belief that policing agencies need to do more to eliminate racism in policies and, more importantly, in its actions. Sheriff Bartlett has made it very clear during the various meetings that the accreditation standards program is vital to the overall operation of the police agency. These standards, which number about 110 different standards, really guide the administration, training, and operation of the policing agency. And these standards are minimums, not maximum, thus affording policing agencies to exceed them. But while the accreditation standards themselves, these are the state standards, are posted on the Sheriff's Office website, the local policies implementing those standards are currently not fully available on that website, bringing up the issue of transparency. The accreditation program requires the policing agency to have written directives related to standards, including those concerning traffic violations committed by residents and non-residents. It also requires that the agency to establish a system of accountability for all traffic summons. National research provides many examples that people of color are more likely to be searched after traffic stops, not told why they were pulled over, ticketed for jaywalking, treated with less respect, and arrested for low-level offenses. In light of this research, the reform plan is silent on the race and ethnicity backgrounds of people who have been involved in routine or spontaneous law enforcement, such as investigatory stops and traffic violations. In addition, the plan does not describe the extent other accreditation standards and local policies, including those related to the areas of police officer discipline, performance evaluations, police complaints, and use of force and personal training records, were examined in the comprehensive review. Each of these standards generate data about individual police officers and interactions between members of the police force and the community. However, there is no mention of these standards and related data of review. So contrary to, out of time. So
You still. Okay.
So, we had to mute you. The 3 minutes are up.
So if
We
you
will
can
we will
submit your,
post a statement. I'm sorry, Chairman.
no, if you could submit it in a written form, we would accept that.
Yeah.
Okay, next is Anna Victoria.
Hi. Thank you for providing this public hearing and for the work that's been done so far on this reform plan. First, I wanted to acknowledge Raymond's experience, which he spoke about in this meeting with having difficulty filing a complaint and difficulty having that complaint heard by both law enforcement and local officials. It's not a unique story. It's something that we've heard many times from different individuals in the community. As a solution to this, I believe that allowing for anonymous complaints to a third party would be helpful in creating a safer community for everyone in Columbia County. My second point, I wanted to echo Supervisor Mussman's concerns about how Columbia County can handle the present state and future of the county jail in a thoughtful way. I don't personally believe that the discussion could be effective without hearing directly from community members who have experience in the county jail. So I would be curious to hear the thoughts of those who have been most impacted by the system in our county. My third point is in regards to a body camera policy and use of force paired together. And this will touch a lot on what Theo said. I hope to see the county adopt policies similar to or exactly like what was proposed by the Park Committee in Hudson in detailed report. I don't think citizens of Columbia County should have different experiences with law enforcement, depending on which agency shows up at their door. I also believe that recording incidents is useless if there aren't measures to prevent excessive force before it happens. And similarly, I believe that policies don't matter if we don't also hold law enforcement accountable who violate those established policies. My final point is that I hope to see third-party oversight for the Reform Plan Implementation Committee, and I would love for the community to be a part of that, in particular Black and Brown residents of our county who are advocates for these topics. And for community members who are not directly a part of the committee, I would love to have clear guidance for how we can keep up with these changes as they're implemented and how we can continue to engage. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next is David Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize for not using video. My internet situation's not good here and it tends to freeze me up if I use both. But I'd like to thank Chairman Morrell, co-chairs Bill Hughes and Supervisor Benvenuto, Moderator Lowell Eaton, and Sherry Franks. These are the people that ensured through the police reform process that it was straightforward, that everyone had a say, everyone was able to provide input, and that the information was readily available when needed. I'd also like to thank the committee participants for their many intelligent and sincere conversations. And I'd also like to thank Sheriff Bartlett and his staff who continually throughout the entire process made many changes. Some of the initiatives he already had in his policy. It was just a matter of letting the public know. Some of the new protocols he's already started and, is not going to wait for this police reform policy to go to New York State. But I'd also like to point out that, you have other agencies also that are making arrests in New York State. You have the Hudson Police and the State Police, who are both very good agencies. I know that Hudson has a public process that they're going through, and I haven't been able to actually research the State Police process, but I assume that it's public. Anyway, this is a beginning. I think it's a very good beginning. The policy can be made even better as it goes along, but I'd like to thank everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Next is Megan Reinhardt.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Where are you?
I'm on the road here, so apologies. I want to say thanks to everyone for the hard work on coming up with this police reform proposal. I agree there's a lot of work ahead, and thanks Brenda and Catherine from Ghent. I love your comments, and Anna as well. I want to bring up a gap that I mentioned on the panel when I spoke previously, and I want to bring it up again as it's still missing. We have not heard from folks who have been incarcerated or are incarcerated. This is a requirement in the governor's order. So we know that incarceration is the new Jim Crow, and many Black folks in prison shouldn't be there in the first place. And in addition, conditions need to be humane and with the intention and evidence of effective restorative programs like mental health services and job prep. What I mean is how many people are getting a good job after leaving. We know they are being overcharged for snacks, phone calls, and we hear stories of bullies and abuse. So my outstanding question is, what is the experience of folks who have been in jail or are in jail? We really need to hear from them, their voice. So I've been really inspired by the Hudson listening effort, and my suggestion and idea is to run a survey, maybe quarterly, where data and stories can be shared. It could be anonymous, and it could be an ongoing outlet for transparency and accountability that seems to be currently missing. I'm trying to connect with Columbia Reentry Program, and I hope that's something that we can pick up as a next step. I also want to suggest looking at Ithaca as a model, and for us as a county to look at other county reform programs and what we could cherry pick that might benefit us. I've been reading the Rochester and Kingston plans too, and there are some really good ideas in there that I think we could benefit from. And I agree and suggest that we adopt the policies also brought up by Theo. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Michael Hoffman.
Hello and good evening. I'm Michael Hoffman. I'm a resident of Hudson and a co-founder of the Social Justice and Civic Engagement Initiative Citizens of Hudson, as well as a Democratic candidate for Treasurer of Hudson. As someone who is deeply committed to racial justice in our communities, I have been following this process very intently from day one, and I have two main points that I want to address here. First, I want to relate how I experience a bit of cognitive dissonance when I flip from page 17 to page 18 in the police reform plan, where on pages 16 and 17 are data describing the racial breakdown of arrests in the county, and on page 18 is the assertion that the current database system used by the Sheriff's Office does not allow for access to data specific to Columbia County and arrests made of Black people, people of color, and other minority groups. Without a deeper explanation of the reporting limitations of the Sheriff's database management software, it's easy for citizens like me to be skeptical that more resources need to be acquired in order to make data accessible on a regular basis when that data is made accessible for the purposes of this plan. If there is mandatory reporting required for the state and Department of Justice, and adequate records management systems are a critical administrative standard to be met for the department's accreditation, what precisely is the problem? Please take this opportunity to provide further detail on why the Sheriff's Office struggles to report their data regularly. Second, I also want to express my appreciation and thanks to Supervisor Houdling for her mention at the beginning of this meeting about the formation of the Reform Plan Implementation Committee. I noticed that this committee is not formally mentioned in the plan itself, despite being noted as a highlight of the plan in the chairman's cover note, and despite it being a key element to how these plans will be implemented. I see this committee as a great opportunity for the Board of Supervisors to incorporate third-party and community oversight into the long-term process that these reforms will ultimately be. I think it would be a poor decision to leave the future of this plan, which has involved community input and experience from the very start, to be left solely in the hands of a select few members sitting on the county's Public Safety Committee. Given the lack of racial diversity we currently see among the Board of Supervisors, it seems prudent to include motivated volunteers and experts in the field of police oversight to ensure that the contents of this plan make it to fruition and continue to be centered on equity and racial justice in Columbia County. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, Supervisor Chimides.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so Michael Chimides, I represent Hudson's 3rd Ward on the Board of Supervisors. First off, I just want to recognize Raymond Strawn's comment. I guess I'm really sorry to hear that you had those experiences. And it's really important to hear from people who are most directly impacted by these programs so we can understand how people are experiencing policing and we can understand how to fix it. So I think this is our opportunity as a Board of Supervisors and the county and as a community to take these things into account and make improvements. The stakes are very high. Over last year, we saw the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and it shocked the nation, really pushed us to take a look at policing and racial justice. We also know that these kinds of impacts on public safety are not new. It was only a few years ago, there was Freddie Gray and Philando Castile and Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland. 20 years ago, it was Amadou Diallo. 30 years ago, it was the murder of the Move family dropping a bomb on their house. 50 years ago, it was the murder of Fred Hampton. And he was killed like Breonna Taylor, where police killed him in his bed. So this is a very serious public safety issue. And, we've seen a lot of people talking about the stats we have here in Columbia County. We need to take ambitious steps collectively together to say that we're going to make sure that the public is safe and they're safe from these kinds of acts. And so we have some current policies that are great to see that we have them. We have a policy against chokeholds. We have training for those officers, so we know that those kinds of things are in place. But that's also not enough. We have a use of force policy, but the use of force policy is not. We need to improve that. The way that it's written is it's around sort of like reasonableness according to the police officer's state of mind. And there has been court cases around this where there was somebody who had diabetes. He went to the store to go get some food for his diabetes. The police officers were called. They showed up and they gave him instructions, but he didn't act according to their instructions because he was going to diabetic shock. And they ended up using force on him, and he sued. And the courts ruled that it was unnecessary use of force, but it was still quote unquote reasonable. And so we have the same kind of standards in place. And we need to sort of take a look at these policies, like the body cameras, like this, also our anti-bias policy, and really look at best practices that exist around the country and sort of draw from that. And we haven't really done enough of that in the current policy. And so I hope that we can make a commitment that we will do that in the short term, and we're going to identify these things to solve this issue. So furthermore, I think we need to recognize what are the best ways of reducing crime. It's not always about policing. The best ways to reduce crime are actually providing a living wage, access to holistic health services and treatment, educational opportunities, and stable housing. And so again, I hope that we as a community can make this commitment to improve things. And I thank everybody for your contributions in this process so far.
Whoops. Thank you, Supervisor Chimides. Okay, that was our last speaker.
Excuse me, my name is supposed to be on there, I believe, Supervisor Sterling.
Okay.
I gave my name to Kelly, but I didn't get through. Can I speak? Okay, if I speak?
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Sterling, a Columbia County Supervisor representing Hudson First Ward. I'm also a member of the Police Reform Panel on both of the elected officials, Law Enforcement Panel, and the Plan Review Committee. I'm deeply honored to be included in this process. Our process has been lengthy, open, and transparent, and we are just now completing a project begun in October. The outcomes I'm most proud of are the mental health referral program that has already been established with important input from our community partners, the clarification of the county's ICE response with a published immigration enforcement policy, and knowing that we will have a reform plan implementation committee and a citizens review panel going forward. And I noted Michael's comment, he doesn't see it in the plan, but we'll make sure it gets in there. There's no question that we have a striking racial inequalities as shown in the arrest and felony rate in the county. This plan will address that, and our progress will be documented. Along with giving my thanks to all that have worked so hard for so many months at the local level, I wish to extend my thanks to our Governor, Andrew Cuomo. I know he's much beleaguered these days, but it was his vision and his executive order number 203 that is bringing much needed reform to New York State. I'm listening and will continue to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Sterling. Okay. I'd just like to thank you all for your comments. And we will be, move forward. All your comments will be on the public record. They're going to be on our YouTube, which will be posted on our website. And, as we move forward and as we review the plan, your comments will be looked at and considered moving forward. So again, I'd like to thank you all. And with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good night, guys.
Bye.
Thank everyone.
You don't forget to submit your comments to me, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Oswaldo, hopefully you have a transcript for me.
He says he does.